Let's talk now to Mr. Chidi Warner, who is a security expert and joins us from the British capital, London. Good morning, Mr. Warner. Thank you for your time.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
Let me begin from what I just finished saying. Subtle threat there from President Putin that, Russia doesn't have to depend on customers in the West. It can redirect its energy resources to those, to those that really need them elsewhere. Is this just bluff, or could this really be something that, if carried out, could create further problems for both sides?
Well, it's a mixture of everything. So it's a bit of bluff, but you're correct. It will create problems for both sides. So the genesis of the Russian and European kind of energy markets was partly the Cold War and the Germans trying to kind of compensate for their actions during the Second World War, where they devastated the Soviet Union and all of Eastern and Central Europe. So part of it was to integrate their economies by buying Russian gas, making sure that the Russians would be getting some sort of payment from the Germans, and also ensuring that all the states in between will get money because they're getting a transit fees from the gas passing through their territory, as well as getting the gas. And they were all part of the Warsaw Pact at the time, so it made sense. Now, when you look at it today, there is a lot of conversation about Europe being dependent on Russian gas, and this is true, but it's very easy for them to keep using that same system. It's very difficult now for the Russians to build a similar infrastructure, i.e. the gas pipelines, the ports that are needed in order to export their gas to other territories. So to export to China, there's one pipeline, which is very long, very expensive, and the Chinese drove a very hard bargain for the prices. The same with exports to India. Again, it needs to be sent by sea. You need LNG terminals. Right now, the Indians are buying, but they're buying at a massive discount. So both sides will suffer. The European Union will be able to get other gas sources of natural gas and energy from the Middle East, from Africa, but they'll have to invest in infrastructure. Russia will have to sell their products somewhere, but most likely at a great discount, because whoever's going to buy it is either going to have to buy it in rubles or have to go through a very tortuous process to ensure that they can, buy it on the, using the existing banking system, which is closed to Russia due to sanctions. So it's essentially a pox on both your houses. Neither side really benefits from this.
You're an expert in all of this, and sometimes there's a benefit in looking at a few steps ahead. A lot of arms are flowing into Central Europe now, particularly into Ukraine. Very sophisticated, very high-grade weapons, and we're not completely sure, because it's a war situation, exactly in whose hands all of this are ending up. I remember that near the very start of the war, President Zelensky was saying, look, anyone who was a Ukrainian could show up and they'd hand them weapons to be able to defend the motherland. Do you see a situation where, even when, and that will eventually have to happen if this is going to end, there is negotiation and peace is restored, that we have already sown the seeds, or they have already sown the seeds for a future crisis with so many high-precision arms in hands that we're not altogether sure who they are?
Yes. So this is the big problem of one of the many big problems of this war, but this is a serious problem which is not getting as much attention because nobody really wants to have to deal with it. But there are people thinking and talking about this right now, in that the second and third order effects of this war. So the first thing is, as you said, a lot of the weapons that are being supplied to Ukraine are deliberately light weapons, man-portable weapons, anti-aircraft, anti-tank weapons, which are a premium on the illegal black market. So everybody from rebel groups, terrorist groups, and criminal groups will be looking to get these weapons. Right now already, there will be criminal networks that will be siphoning off these weapons, both in Russia and in Ukraine, and Central Europe and Eastern Europe, all trying to get these weapons, and get them ready for after the war, when they can sell them at a premium. At the same time, there's also, so we're talking about non-state actors, but state actors as well can exploit this. So Russia or any other country could, acquire a Stinger and use it, plant it outside any Western European capital, shoot down a commercial aircraft, and it's, a great not just a great terror attack in terms of, the mass casualties, but also the propaganda value of using a Western weapon system against a Western target would be, a great boon for them. So the problems of this war are not just, the war in of itself. It's those, as I said, those second and third order effects. And then we've not talked about the heavy weapons. A huge amount of heavy weaponry has been captured, has been sold, has been distributed throughout Ukraine by the Russians. The question is, what happens after the war to these weapons? Not only will some be sold off to other parties, in the West or even to China, they will also fall into the hands of other parties and other combatants. And Europe is at peace right now, but it takes very little for Europe to descend into war. And if you look at the Balkans or places like that, if weapons start filtering in there, it changes the balance of power and changes the dynamics.
When I spoke to you last, you weren't very optimistic about the peace talks and the negotiations that were going on at the time. For all practical purposes, that has stopped now, even though we're hearing from the Ukrainians that they're prepared to go on and that, in fact, they continue to talk to the Russians virtually. But during the course of this week, the Russian president made a rare appearance at the line of his country's borders with Belarus to meet the Belarusian president. And at that point, he said, well, for all practical purposes, the talks were at a dead end. And many people took that to mean that they were dead. But being at a dead end is not the same thing as being dead, which meant that it was quite possible that those things would still return to the way that they were and that they could possibly improve. In that kind of situation, would you say that there's any hope left for this? Is there any hope left for the possibility that talks could bring this to an end without anybody being victorious, shall we say?
So unfortunately, no. The war will end with talks. There will be a negotiated end to this war, but when I say there has to be, that's not because I want it to be, but this is just how this war is panning out. There will be more fighting, more killing, more suffering. The Battle of Donbass will take place. The Russians need to have a victory or need to capture enough territory in order to be in a strong position for that negotiation. They're already in a very strong position, to be brutally honest. The capture of the Black Sea coast and the forces in Donbass give them a good negotiating position. But considering the goals that they've set for themselves publicly, they will need to advance much further. They will need to liberate, in their terms, Donbass and Luhansk. They can't do that by negotiations. And the Ukrainians, after all the suffering they've endured, will not accept anything other than total victory. So both sides, unfortunately, will have to fight each other to a stalemate, and then the negotiations will take place. Most likely what will happen is, after the Battle of the Donbass, wherever the Russians are, they will declare victory and try and negotiate on that basis. The question then will be, will the Ukrainians accept that basis or not?
You're in the British capital, you're in London, and the last time I spoke to you, I asked you about this, so I just want you to give me an update about it. The Britons haven't just left the EU before this crisis broke out. This is the first major test of life outside of the EU for Britain, and it happened to be foreign policy. And they've aligned themselves with EU policy on this one and with American policy, which we would say would be traditional. But in terms of the word out there and what the discussions out there are and what analysts like yourself, both in security and diplomacy, have, do you still think that the British public is supporting Boris Johnson's government on this to the hilt, and that the Ukraine scheme that Britain put in place to house Ukrainians fleeing from Ukraine and this crisis is, I'm trying to avoid that word, but I can't, is a vote winner?
Yeah, so in short, yes, this is, for the British government, this has actually been a boon. It's allowed Boris Johnson to escape his domestic problems with this Partygate scandal. It's allowed him to project an image of the image that they've really wanted to project throughout Brexit, but unfortunately haven't been able to because it's been created it's been done so chaotically. But to be able to present an image of Britain independent of EU foreign policy, but in tandem with European values and in tandem with American values. So for Boris Johnson and the current government, this crisis has really helped them. They've been able to project a good image, a strong image. They've supported Ukraine with military equipment, with intelligence. There's been training going on for the past 8 years or so. And as you saw from Boris Johnson's visit to Kiev, that is greatly appreciated and reciprocated. One thing about President Zelensky is he's very astute, a great understander of the world, of the media environment at least. And he understands that boosting Britain is a way of kind of not provoking, but pushing the EU to take a stronger position, because the EU clearly seeing Britain outside of, after Brexit, outside of its kind of circle, doesn't want to be shown up as the weaker party. So Zelensky has fairly cleverly, but not too obviously, played both parties off against each other to kind of get the British who are doing what they want to do, supporting heavily, but to try and use that to push the EU to do the same. In terms of the British public and their support for the war, it is extremely high. So there is a huge amount of sympathy for Ukraine, a huge amount of sympathy for the Ukrainian people. It translates into, as I said, a boon for the government in that they've used the excuse of, well, we can't deal with, we can't change a prime minister, due to him being fined for breaking lockdown rules during this conflict. So all in all, it's a horrible phrase, but Boris Johnson has had a good war. There's a lot more to it than that, but at this point, I think you'd say yes. It's a popular kind of policy. It's a popular theme in the British electorate, and it's unlikely that the government will change tack anytime soon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chidi, for that update and for your perspective on the situation at this point. Thank you, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.